I never thought I would wake up on a random Tuesday to discover that my own son had stolen my BMW in the middle of the night to give it to his father-in-law. It was as if I were a complete stranger in his life. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel William's Revenge Stories and hit the bell icon because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what city you are watching from. My name is Robert Miller. I am 64 years old, and all my life I thought I knew my son Michael. I was so wrong. On April 15th, 24, my world shook when I opened the garage door of my house in Chicago and found an empty space where my silver 2021 BMW 3 Series should have been. At first, panic took over me. My first thought was that someone had broken in during the night. I ran through the whole house looking for signs of a break-in. I checked windows and doors, but everything was intact. The car keys, which I always left in the small ceramic bowl by the entrance, were also gone. With trembling hands, I dialed the local police number, but before I could complete the call, my phone rang. It was Steve, my lifelong friend and neighbor. "Robert, are you okay?" he asked with a worried voice. "Steve, someone stole my car. I do not know how, but—" Wait, he interrupted me. "Your silver BMW, right? Because I just saw David, the father of Sarah, your daughter-in-law, driving it down the main avenue half an hour ago. I thought you had lent it to him, but it seemed strange, because it was so early, barely 7 in the morning." The world stopped. David Smith, the father-in-law of my son Michael, driving my car. It could not be a coincidence. My legs felt weak, and I had to sit on the living room sofa. "Are you sure it was him, Steve?" "Completely sure, Robert. I have known him by sight since Michael married Sarah 3 years ago. I even rolled down my window to say hello, but I think he did not see me." He was focused on the traffic. I hung up the phone with a mixture of confusion and a growing suspicion I did not want to accept. Michael had spare keys to my car for 2 years since he had to take it to the mechanic while I was down with the flu. I never thought he would use them without my permission. Immediately, I dialed my son's number. The phone rang 5 times before he answered with a sleepy voice. "Dad, it is 8 in the morning. What is wrong?" "Michael, where is my car?" A long silence followed too long. I could hear background noise as if he were getting out of bed. "Your car, why do you ask that?" "Because it is not in my garage, and Steve just saw David driving it through downtown. So I am asking you again, where is my BMW?" Another silence. This time I could hear Sarah speaking in the background, although I could not make out the words. "Dad, can I explain?" Then explain Michael. It was a surprise for David. Today is his 58th birthday, and— A surprise, I interrupted him, feeling the blood rush to my head. "You took my car without permission to give it to your father-in-law as a birthday gift. It is not that simple, Dad. David has been like a father to me these last few years. He has supported me, advised me, and treated me like a true son. I thought you would understand." The betrayal hit me like a punch in the stomach. My own son, whom I raised alone after his mother, Amanda and I divorced when he was 12, was telling me that another man had taken my place in his heart. "Michael, that car is worth $40,000. It is not a gift you can give without consulting me first. Dad, do not be dramatic. It is just a car. David needs it more than you. He works every day. He has to take Sarah to work and run errands for the family. You barely leave the house since you retired." His words were like daggers. Just a car that had cost me years of savings that I bought after retiring from my job at the textile plant where I worked for 40 years. "Michael, I want you to go to David's house right now and bring my car back." "I'm not going to do that, Dad. David is already happy with his gift, and I am not going to take it away from him to give it back to someone who does not even appreciate it." The line went dead. My son had hung up on me. I sat there with the phone in my hand, processing what had just happened. In 32 years of life, Michael had never disrespected me like that. He had never put another person above me, and certainly he had never taken something of mine without permission to give it to a stranger. But David was not a stranger to Michael. He was, according to my own son's words, like a father to him. And I, his real father, the one who had raised, educated, and supported him all his life, had become someone who does not even appreciate it. The reality began to settle in. My son had not only taken my car without permission, but he had made a conscious decision to give it to another man, completely disregarding my feelings and my rights as the owner. That morning of April 15th, I did not just lose my BMW. I discovered that I had lost my son long before without even realizing it. After hanging up the phone, I remained motionless for several minutes, trying to process the magnitude of what I had just heard. Michael's words resonated in my mind like painful echoes. David has been like a father to me. Each syllable was a direct stab to the heart. I went to the kitchen and made myself a strong coffee. My hands shook slightly as I held the cup. I needed to think clearly, but emotions threatened to cloud my judgment. For 32 years, I had been Michael's only parent, especially after the divorce with Amanda in 2006. I remembered all the sacrifices I had made for him. When Amanda and I separated, Michael chose to stay with me. I worked double shifts at the Miller & Sons textile factory to pay for St. Joseph's private school, where he studied from 13 to 18. The tuition was $500 a month, a fortune for a single father in those years. Then came college. Michael wanted to study business administration at the State University. The annual tuition was $12,000, not counting books, transport, and personal expenses. For 5 years, from 2011 to 2016, I invested every dollar I could save in his education. Calculating conservatively, I spent over $80,000 in total to give him the best training possible. And now this same son to whom I dedicated my life was telling me that another man had taken my place as a father figure. At 10 in the morning, I decided to drive to Michael and Sarah's apartment in the north side suburbs. I took the number 70 bus, something I had not done in years, and during the 25-minute ride, I reflected on how we had reached this situation. Michael met Sarah Smith in 2019 when they were both working at a digital marketing firm. From the beginning, I noticed my son started to change. Sarah came from a wealthy family. Her father, David, had a small construction company, and her mother, Linda, worked as a nurse at the city hospital. When Michael began frequenting the Smith household, he started making subtle comparisons. Sarah's father is always available to help, he would tell me. David knows important people in Chicago. He has contacts that could help me in my career. At first, I interpreted these comments as natural admiration for his girlfriend's family. But over time, the comparisons became more direct and painful. "Why did you never take me fishing like David does with Sarah?" he asked me once. "Why do you not have your own company like him?" I arrived at the building where Michael and Sarah lived, a modern apartment complex that I had helped them furnish when they got married in September of 2021. I gave them $10,000 for the living room and master bedroom furniture money I took from my retirement fund. I went up to the 3rd floor and rang the bell. Sarah opened the door, dressed in a pink nightgown and slippers. Her expression changed immediately when she saw me. "Hello, Robert. Michael is not home right now. Where is my car, Sarah?" She looked down, clearly uncomfortable. "I think you should talk to Michael about that. I already spoke to him this morning. He hung up on me when I asked him to bring my BMW back. Now I am asking you, where is my vehicle?" Sarah sighed and invited me into the apartment. The living room was spotless, decorated with the furniture I had paid for. On the center table were photos of Michael and Sarah, with her parents' images of family dinners, vacations, and celebrations. I looked for a photo of me with Michael, but found none. "Robert, please sit down," Sarah said, pointing to the brown leather sofa that had cost $3,000. "I prefer to stand. I just want to know where my car is. It is at my parents' house. Michael gave it to Dad early this morning around 6. It was a surprise for his birthday." "A surprise. Sarah, that car is mine. Michael had no right to give it away without my consent. I understand you're upset, Robert, but you have to understand the situation. Dad has been very good to Michael. He gave him a job in his company when Michael lost his job last March. He pays him $3,000 a month more than he earned at his previous job. This was the first time I heard about Michael's unemployment. My son had not told me anything about losing his job, nor about working for David. Michael lost his job. When? Why did he not tell me? Sarah shifted nervously in her seat. He did not want to worry you. You know how Michael is, he does not like to admit when things go wrong. But he hid it from me for a whole month, and now he works for your father. Yes, Dad gave him a chance when no one else would. Michael is very grateful. That is why he wanted to give him the car as a birthday gift. With what money did he buy it, Sarah? Because that car is mine, it is in my name, and Michael had no authorization to sell it or give it away. Well, Sarah hesitated. Technically, he did not buy it, but Dad needed a new car, and Michael thought it would be a nice gesture. A nice gesture made with my property, I interrupted her. Where is Michael now? He is at Dad's office, helping him with some construction projects. At that moment, Michael walked through the front door. Upon seeing me, his expression hardened. What are you doing here, Dad? I came to get my car keys. I already told you. This morning I am not going to take the gift away from David. Michael, that car is worth $40,000. It is not a gift you can give without my permission. Oh, it is always about the money with you, Michael shouted. It is all about how much things cost, how much you spend, how much you save. It is about respect, Michael. Respect for other people's property, and for your father. My father, Michael laughed bitterly. When was the last time you acted like my father? When was the last time you asked me how I was, what I needed, what my dreams were? His words hurt me deeply, but I maintained my composure. I have supported you all your life, Michael. I paid for your education. I helped you with this apartment. I give you $1,000 a month since you got married. Money, always money, he shouted again. David listens to me, advises me, treats me like an adult, not like a child who needs to be financially supported. That money you despise so much cost me 40 years of hard work, and David built his company from scratch. He is a true entrepreneur, a man who deserves respect, and I do not. Michael stared at me for several seconds before answering. You are just a retired factory worker clinging to the past. David is my future. Those words were the final blow. My own son had just reduced my entire life, all my sacrifices, to just a retired factory worker. Very well, Michael, I told him with a calm but firm voice. If that is your decision, then you will have to live with the consequences. I left the apartment without saying another word. I knew exactly what I had to do. The bus ride back was one of the longest of my life. Every stop, every traffic light gave me more time to process the poisonous words Michael had spoken. Just a retired factory worker clinging to the past. That phrase repeated in my mind like a cursed song I could not silence. Upon arriving home, I went directly to my study, a small room I had converted into a personal office after retiring. There I kept all the important documents of my life, work contracts, payment receipts, bills, family photographs, and most importantly, all the receipts of the expenses I had made for Michael's education and well-being over the last 20 years. I opened the gray metal filing cabinet I had bought in '98 and began pulling out folders organized by year. I wanted to remember exactly how much I had invested in my son, not out of resentment, but to understand the magnitude of his ingratitude. The first folder contained the receipts from St. Joseph's Private School from September 2006 to June 2011. Monthly payments of $500 for 5 academic years. I calculated quickly, $500 multiplied by 10 months. A year for 5 years totaled $25,000 just in tuition. But that was not all. There were also school uniforms, textbooks, educational field trips, private math tutoring when Michael had difficulties in his junior year. I clearly remembered when I hired Martha Jones, a private tutor, who charged $40 an hour twice a week for 6 months, another $2,000 roughly. The second folder contained the university documents. The annual tuition at the State University was $12,000 in 2011, but the price increased every year. By the time Michael graduated in 2016, the tuition had risen to $14,000 a year. In total university, tuition cost me $65,000, but university expenses included much more than tuition. Michael lived in a student dorm for the first 2 years at $600 a month. Then he moved to a shared apartment that cost $500 a month plus utilities. I gave him an additional $500 a month for food transport and personal expenses. I took out my calculator and began to sum meticulously. 5 university years, including housing, food, and personal expenses, had represented an additional investment of $60,000. Added to the private school expenses, the total amounted to more than $150,000. But my sacrifices for Michael did not end with his college graduation. In 2017, when he got his first job at an insurance company, with a starting salary of $2,000 a month, I continued to help him financially. I bought him his first formal suit for job interviews, $500 at a department store. I paid for an advanced management course because he needed to improve his professional profile. $2,000 for 6 months of intensive classes. When Michael met Sarah in 2019, I was the one who funded many of their first dates. I lent him my car on weekends, gave him extra money to take her to fancy restaurants, to buy her flowers and gifts. I wanted my son to be able to court the woman he loved without worrying about economic limitations. In 2020, when Sarah and Michael decided to move in together, I helped them with the apartment deposit $3,000, equivalent to 2 months' rent. I also bought them basic appliances, a Bosch washing machine for $800, a Samsung refrigerator for $1,000, an LG 55-inch TV for $700. When they got married in September 2021, my wedding gift was extraordinary. In addition to the $10,000 I mentioned for the living room and bedroom furniture, I also paid for the honeymoon. A week in Santorini, Greece, which cost $5,000, including flights, hotel, and meals. Since his marriage, I had been sending him $1,000 a month as family support. In 2.5 years, that added up to $30,000. Michael had never asked me if I could afford that amount. He simply received it every month, as if it were his natural right. As I reviewed all these documents, a deep sadness took over me. It was not sadness for the money spent. It was sadness for the lack of recognition for the absolute ingratitude of a son I had loved unconditionally. I remembered specific moments that now took on a different meaning, like when Michael turned 25 in 2017, and I organized a family dinner at a steakhouse, one of the finest in Chicago. I invited 8 people, including some of Michael's friends. The bill was $900, but seeing my son happy seemed worth every penny. Or when Michael had that motorcycle accident in 2018 and needed private physical therapy because public insurance had a waiting list. I paid $2,500 for 2 months of intensive treatment so he could recover completely without side effects. All these memories proved a painful reality to me. I had been much more than a father to Michael. I had been his mentor, his financial support, his emotional and financial safety net, and he had reduced all that to just a retired factory worker. But what hurt me most was the constant comparison with David Smith. Michael admired David because he had his own company, because he knew important people, because he was a true entrepreneur. However, Michael seemed to have forgotten that David had inherited the construction company from his father, while I had built everything from scratch, being the son of a farmer from a small town in the Midwest. My father, Anthony Miller, worked all his life in cornfields, unable to give me anything more than values of honesty and hard work. I arrived in Chicago at 18 without contacts, without money, without anything but the determination to build a better life for my future family. For 40 years, I worked in the textile factory, starting as a machine operator and rising to production supervisor. I never had the opportunity to be an entrepreneur, because every dollar I earned, I invested in our survival and Michael's future. I did not have the luxury of risking money on business ventures. I had the responsibility to ensure that my son had the opportunities I never had. And now this same son despised me for not having been as successful as David, a man who had inherited everything he had. The irony was bitter. Michael now worked for David, earning $3,000 a month, and saw this as a great opportunity. But I had been giving him $1,000 a month for free, without asking for anything in return for years. In relative terms, my equivalent salary for being his father had been much more generous than what David paid him for being his employee. I closed the folders and put away all the documents. I had not reviewed them to torture myself with numbers and memories, but to confirm something I already knew in my heart. I had been an exemplary father who deserved respect, not contempt. Michael had taken my BMW not only as an act of theft, but as a symbolic statement. He was telling me that David deserved my possessions more than I did. He was telling me that years of parental sacrifice had no value compared to a few months of employment and fake friendship. But he had gravely mistaken by underestimating me. I was not just a retired factory worker clinging to the past. I was a man who had built a dignified life with honest work, who had raised a son with love and dedication, and I was not going to let anyone, not even my own son, trample on my dignity. It was time to teach Michael that actions have consequences, and that respect is not optional, but fundamental in any human relationship, even between parents and children. That night of April 15th, I could not sleep. I stayed awake until 3 a.m, sitting on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The fresh spring air failed to calm the storm raging inside me. It was not just anger I felt. It was a complex mixture of disappointment, betrayal, and for the first time in many years, an iron determination to act. For decades I had been the patient, understanding father who always put Michael's needs above my own. But that era had come to an end. At 6 a.m. on April 16th, I made the first concrete decision. I went to the Chase Bank on State Street, where I had my main account for 15 years. I waited until they opened the doors at 8:30 and asked to speak with my personal banker, Helen Martin. "Good morning, Mr. Miller. How can I help you today?" "Helen, I need to cancel the automatic monthly transfer I have scheduled to my son Michael's account." Helen checked her computer for a few minutes. "I see here a recurring transfer of $1,000 a month to account ending in 8934. Are you sure you want to cancel it?" "Completely sure, and I want the cancellation to be effective immediately." "Understood, Mr. Miller. Is there any specific problem we can help you resolve?" "It is not a banking problem, Helen. It is a family problem that requires drastic measures." I signed the necessary documents and left the bank feeling that I had taken the first important step. Michael would receive his usual transfer on April 30th, as always, but it would be the last one. Starting in May, he would have to manage completely alone with his $3,000 salary at David's company. My next stop was the police precinct on Grand Avenue. The imposing gray concrete building intimidated me slightly, but I maintained my resolve. At the information desk, a uniformed officer attended me with professional courtesy. "Good morning. I am here to report the theft of my vehicle. Was your vehicle stolen without your consent?" "Exactly. My son took the keys during the early morning and took my BMW without my authorization to give it to another person." The officer frowned slightly. "Your son. How old is he?" 32 years old. He is a fully capable adult who understands the legal implications of his actions." "I understand. You will need to speak with a detective specialized in property crimes. Please take a seat in the waiting area." I waited for 40 minutes until I was called to a small but tidy office. Behind the desk sat a man of about 45, bald, with a gray mustache and a serious expression. "I am Detective Mike O'Connor. I have been informed that you want to report the theft of your vehicle by your son, by your... It is a somewhat unusual situation. Detective, I understand it may seem strange to report a family member, but my son has committed a crime. He took my BMW without permission and gave it to someone else. The vehicle is valued at $40,000. Detective O'Connor took notes as I recounted the events of the previous day. When I mentioned that Michael worked for his wife's father and that he had given the car as a thank you gift, the detective's expression became more grave. Mr. Miller, this is not simply a theft. It is misappropriation and illegal disposal of property. These are serious crimes that can carry a prison sentence. What options do I have, Detective? We can proceed in two ways. First option, file a formal complaint and follow the full judicial process. Second option, try family mediation to recover the vehicle without criminal consequences for your son. Detective, for 32 years I have tried family mediation. I have been patient, understanding, and generous. My son has responded with contempt and theft. I want to proceed with the formal complaint. Very well, I will need the full vehicle documentation proof that you are the legal owner and a detailed statement of the facts. I spent the next 2 hours providing all the necessary information. I brought with me the BMW's title, the insurance policy, and the purchase receipts from the dealership where I had bought the car in March 2021 for $45,000. Detective O'Connor explained the legal procedure. First, we will locate the vehicle and verify its condition. Then we will proceed to arrest your son for questioning. Depending on his cooperation, he could be released with charges, or we could request pretrial detention. How long will the whole process take? Locating and recovering the vehicle, probably between 3 and 5 days. The full judicial process can take between 3 and 6 months, depending on whether your son pleads guilty or requests a trial. I left the precinct feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. I had crossed a line I never thought I would cross, filing criminal charges against my own son. But the circumstances had forced me to take that extreme decision. On my way home, I stopped at a coffee shop near the city square to reflect on what I had just done. I ordered a black coffee and a croissant, and sat at a table by the window watching people walk down the street. A part of me expected to feel guilt or remorse, but the only thing I felt was a strange sense of liberation. For years, I had been carrying the emotional and financial weight of maintaining a one-sided relationship with Michael. I gave love, support money, and understanding while he took everything as due and offered me contempt in return. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Amanda, my ex-wife and Michael's mother. We had not spoken for months, except for occasional messages on birthdays or holidays. "Robert, I need to talk to you urgently." "Can you come to my house this afternoon?" "What happened, Amanda?" "Michael called me this morning completely hysterical. He says you threatened to sue him over a car issue. I do not understand anything that is happening, but I need to hear your version. Did he tell you he stole my BMW to give it to his father-in-law?" A long silence on the other end of the line. "He did what?" "Exactly what you heard, and I did not threaten to sue him. I already filed a complaint at the precinct this morning." "Oh my God, Robert, did you report your own son?" "Amanda, our son stole a $40,000 vehicle from me to give as a gift to a man he has known for 3 years, while telling me I am just a retired factory worker who does not deserve respect. What would you have done?" Another silence. I could hear Amanda processing the information. "Come to my house at 5. We need to talk about this face to face." "Okay. See you at 5. I finished my coffee and went back home. I had several hours before meeting Amanda and decided to use that time productively. I called my personal lawyer, Bernard Peters, who had handled my divorce and other minor legal matters over the last few years. "Bernard, I need urgent legal advice on a theft case. Have you been robbed, Robert? Do you want us to file a claim with the insurance? It is more complicated than that. My son stole my car to give it to someone else, and I just filed criminal charges against him. Come to my office tomorrow at 10 in the morning. This case is going to be more complex than you imagine. especially considering the family implications. That afternoon, as I headed to Amanda's house in the suburbs, I reflected on how we had reached this situation. Michael had not become an ungrateful person overnight. The signs had been there for years, but I had chosen to ignore them out of fatherly love. I remembered when Michael turned 30 and organized a party at a fancy restaurant inviting 20 people. At the end of the night, when the $1,500 bill arrived, he simply looked at me expecting me to pay without even asking if I could afford it. And I paid as always. Or when he married Sarah and asked me to borrow an additional $3,000 for the ceremony, promising to pay it back when he had a better financial situation. That was 2.5 years ago, and he had never mentioned repayment. All these memories confirmed that I had made the right decision. Michael needed to learn that actions have consequences, and that respect for parents is not negotiable, regardless of age or circumstances. Upon arriving at Amanda's house, I mentally prepared for a difficult but necessary conversation. It was time for someone else to hear the full truth about our son's behavior. Amanda's house had not changed much since our divorce in 2006. The small semi-detached cottage with a front garden was still painted cream with the blue shutters she had chosen when we bought the property in '98. Ringing the bell at 5 o'clock sharp, I felt a strange nostalgia mixed with the tension of the present moment. Amanda opened the door, looking worried. At 62, she maintained her natural elegance, although the expression lines around her brown eyes revealed the weight of the years. Her brown hair, now with gray strands, was pulled back in a simple bun. "Come in, Robert. I made coffee." "Thanks." The living room kept some furniture from our married days. The solid wood sideboard we had bought at an antique shop, and the coffee table, where Michael used to do his homework. On the mantelpiece were family photographs from different eras, including some of Michael graduating from college. "Tell me exactly what happened," Amanda said, pouring 2 cups of steaming coffee. I recounted all the events from the moment I discovered the absence of the BMW to my visit to the precinct that morning. Amanda listened in silence, but her expression became graver with every detail. "Did Michael really tell you that you are just a retired factory worker?" Word for word, he also said David had been like a father to him, and that I did not understand what it meant to be a true entrepreneur. Amanda put her cup on the table with more force than necessary. "That boy has gone crazy. Robert, you were an exemplary father, especially after the divorce. I know better than anyone how much you sacrificed for him." Her words surprised me. During our marriage, Amanda often criticized me for working too many overtime hours, for prioritizing work over family. Hearing her acknowledge my parental efforts after so many years was unexpectedly emotional. "Did you know Michael lost his job in March? I had no idea. Why did he not tell either of us?" "According to Sarah, he did not want to worry us, but it seems more likely he did not want me to stop sending him the $1,000 a month." "Do you still give him that amount every month?" "Not anymore. This morning I canceled the automatic transfer at the bank." Amanda nodded with approval. "Well done. Michael is an adult man with a wife and a job. He should not depend financially on you." My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. It was Detective O'Connor. "Mr. Miller, we have located your vehicle at David Smith's residence on Main Street, number 47. Tomorrow morning we will execute the recovery order. Can you accompany us as a witness at 9? "Of course, Detective. I will be there." "One more thing, Mr. Miller. We have checked your son Michael's background. He has no prior criminal record, which will play in his favor during the judicial process. However, the expert valuation of the vehicle confirms that we are talking about a serious felony." "What does that mean exactly?" "Misappropriation of property valued at over $20,000 constitutes grand larceny with prison sentences of 1 to 4 years. It is not a minor offense." I hung up the phone and explained the conversation to Amanda. Her face paled slightly. "Robert, are you completely sure you want to go through with this? A criminal conviction would ruin Michael's professional life. Amanda, for 32 years, I have protected Michael from the consequences of his actions. I have given him everything without asking for anything in return, and his response has been to steal from me, insult me, and despise me. When is it enough? You are right, she sighed. But as a mother, I cannot help but worry. I am his father too, and I worry about him. But sometimes loving a son means teaching him that decisions have consequences. We spent the next hour recalling episodes from Michael's childhood and adolescence that in retrospect showed problematic patterns we had ignored. Like when he was 15 and took money from my wallet to impress a girl at school, buying her an expensive gift. When I confronted him, his answer was, "I thought you would not mind. You always have money." Or when he turned 18 and crashed my previous car, a sedan, because he had been drinking at a party. Instead of taking responsibility, he blamed me for not paying for earlier driving lessons. He always found ways to justify his mistakes, Amanda reflected, and we always found ways to excuse him. That night, I returned to my apartment with a sense of renewed resolution. Amanda had given me something I did not expect: validation that my feelings were justified, and support for the difficult decisions I had taken. The next day, April 17th, I arrived at the precinct at 8:45 in the morning. Detective O'Connor was waiting for me, along with 2 uniformed officers and a vehicle recovery specialist. "Good morning, Mr. Miller. We have coordinated everything for the recovery of your BMW. Mr. Smith has been notified that he must surrender the vehicle voluntarily, but if he refuses, we have a court order to confiscate it." We headed in 2 patrol cars towards Main Street. The address corresponded to a middle-class residential area with 2-story townhouses and small gardens. Upon arriving at number 47, I could see my silver BMW parked in the open driveway as if it were David's legitimate property. Detective O'Connor rang the bell, and we waited. David Smith opened the door after several minutes. He was a man of medium height, stocky build, dark hair with graying sides and a defiant expression. He wore a navy polo shirt and jeans projecting the image of someone used to being in control. "Detective O'Connor, they already called me yesterday. I do not understand why so much fuss over a gift my son-in-law gave me legally." "Mr. Smith, the vehicle in question did not belong to your son-in-law. It is the registered property of Mr. Robert Miller, who is present here as a witness. Your son-in-law had no legal authority to transfer ownership of the vehicle. But Michael told me his father had authorized the gift. He even showed me the keys. Having access to keys does not equate to sales or transfer authorization. Did you sign any bill of sale? Did you make any official payment for the vehicle?" David hesitated before answering. "No, we did not sign papers. It was a family gift, not a commercial transaction." "Then you received goods valued at $40,000 without legal documentation, backing the legitimate transfer of ownership. That makes you a receiver of stolen property." David's expression changed drastically. "Wait a moment, detective. I knew nothing about legal problems. Michael assured me everything was in order. Mr. Smith, I need you to hand over the vehicle keys immediately. You will also have to appear at the station tomorrow morning to give a statement as a witness in the case." David looked at me with a mixture of resentment and nervousness. "Are you really going to ruin your own son's life over a car?" "My son ruined our relationship when he decided to steal from me to impress you," I replied calmly but firmly. David went on to the house and returned with the BMW keys. The specialist technician verified that the vehicle had no damage and that all systems were working correctly. After 15 minutes, they handed me the keys to my own car. Sitting behind the wheel of my BMW again was a strange experience. On one hand, I felt relief to recover my property. On the other hand, I knew this moment marked a point of no return in my relationship with Michael. As I followed the patrol cars back to the station, I reflected on David's expression when he realized the legal implications of his actions. Michael had not just stolen from me. He had put his father-in-law in a compromised legal position by making him a receiver of stolen goods. At the station, Detective O'Connor informed me about the next steps in the process. Mr. Miller, now that we have recovered the vehicle, we will proceed to arrest your son for formal questioning. This will likely happen tomorrow or the day after. Do you want us to notify you when this happens? Yes, Detective. I want to be informed of all developments in the case. One last question. Has your son tried to contact you since yesterday? No, my phone has been completely silent. That is unusual. Normally, when people commit these types of impulsive crimes, they try to repair the damage by contacting the victim to apologize or negotiate. Michael's silence told me more about his character than any conversation. He felt no remorse for his actions. He was probably angry because his plans had been thwarted. I drove my BMW back home, but decided not to leave it in the usual garage. Instead, I took it to a secure parking lot near downtown, paying $20 a day for safe custody. I was not going to give Michael another chance to steal it from me. That night, while eating dinner alone in my apartment, I knew I had made all the right decisions. Recovering my car was just the first step. The judicial process that would come would determine if Michael would finally learn that actions have consequences, or if he would continue down the destructive path he had chosen. Friday, April 19th, dawned gray and rainy in Chicago. From my balcony, I could see low clouds hanging over the downtown buildings, creating a somber atmosphere that seemed to foreshadow the events that were about to unfold. At 8 in the morning, while eating breakfast in silence, my phone rang. Mr. Miller, this is Detective O'Connor. We have scheduled your son's arrest for 10 this morning at his home in the suburbs. By protocol, I must inform you that you have the right to be present during the procedure if you wish. The idea of witnessing the arrest of my own son generated conflicting feelings. On one hand, part of me wanted to be there to make sure everything went correctly. On the other hand, the image of Michael being handcuffed in front of me was something I was not sure I could emotionally handle. Detective, I prefer not to be present during the arrest, but I want you to keep me informed about how the interrogation goes. Understood, Mr. Miller. We will call you afternoon with a full report. After hanging up, I remained motionless for several minutes, contemplating the magnitude of what was happening. In less than an hour, my son would be arrested by the authorities under criminal charges that I myself had filed. It was a moment I never imagined would arrive in my life. I decided to leave the house to avoid the temptation to change my mind or show up at Michael's apartment. I walked to the local park where I used to run during my first years of retirement. Morning exercise had been part of my routine until I started feeling depressed about the growing distance from Michael. Walking along the wet paths of the park, I remembered the times I had taken Michael there as a child. I taught him to ride a bike on these same paths in the summer of '99 when he was 7. I remember running alongside him, holding him so he wouldn't fall until he finally managed to pedal alone. His smile of triumph that day was one of the most precious images of my fatherly memory. Now, 25 years later, that same person was being arrested for stealing from me. At 11:30, I found a bench near the artificial lake and sat watching families walk with their children. A young father pushed his little daughter on a swing while she laughed with pure joy. The scene filled me with melancholy, reminding me of simpler times, when Michael and I shared that kind of innocent happiness. My phone vibrated with a text message. It was from Sarah. "Robert, please reconsider what you are doing. Michael is desperate and has been crying all morning. This is going to destroy our marriage." I did not reply immediately. Michael's tears and Sarah's marital problems were not my responsibility. For years I had assumed the emotional responsibility of solving all my son's problems, but that era was over. At 12:15, Detective O'Connor called me. "Mr. Miller, the arrest was carried out without incident. Your son is currently in our facilities for formal questioning. I must inform you that initially he denied the charges, but when we presented the evidence and Mr. Smith's testimony, he admitted to taking the vehicle without your authorization. How did he behave during the arrest? Your son showed signs of shock and bewilderment. According to my officers, he constantly repeated that you would not dare to go through with the complaint. He seemed genuinely surprised that we showed up at his door. That information revealed something important about Michael's mindset. Even after our confrontational conversations of the last few days, he still believed I would give in to his wishes, as I had done all his adult life. What happens now, Detective? Your son has the right to remain detained for up to 48 hours, while we complete the preliminary investigation. After that, he must appear before a judge, who will determine if he is released with precautionary measures, or if he remains in pretrial detention. What are the chances of each scenario? Given that it is a nonviolent crime and your son has no criminal record, it is most likely he will be released, with the obligation to appear periodically before the court. However, he will have to post bail, which can range between $3,000 and $10,000, depending on the magistrate's decision. That afternoon, I decided to visit my lawyer, Bernard Peters, to receive advice on the legal aspects of the process. His office downtown was located in a historic building with high ceilings and windows overlooking a small plaza. Robert the Bauer have reviewed the documentation you sent me yesterday by email. Your case is solid from a legal point of view, but I want to make sure you understand the family and emotional implications of going forward. Bernard, I have reflected on this for days. Michael crossed a line that cannot be ignored. I understand your position, but I must explain the full process. If Michael pleads guilty, he will likely receive a probation sentence between 12 and 18 months, plus the obligation to pay restitution for the economic damage caused. If he decides to go to trial and is found guilty, the penalties could be more severe. What kind of economic restitution? Besides returning the vehicle, which has already been done, the court could order him to pay damages for unauthorized use, legal costs, and potentially an additional fine. We are talking about between $8,000 and $15,000 in total. That figure impacted me not because it was excessive, but because it represented almost 5 months of the salary Michael earned working for David. The economic consequences of the crime would be significant for him and Sarah. Bernard, is there a possibility that Michael actually goes to prison? It is unlikely for a first non-violent offense, but if the judge considers the theft was premeditated and the value of the stolen good is considerable, he could order effective prison time of 6 to 12 months. I left Bernard's office with a clearer understanding of what Michael faced. The consequences of his actions would be lasting criminal record, significant economic debts, and potential prison time, all for an impulsive gesture of gratitude toward his father-in-law. That night, while dining alone at a small diner near my apartment, Sarah called me again. "Robert, please, I need to talk to you. Michael is devastated. He has been crying since he was arrested this morning." "Where is he now?" "They released him 2 hours ago on the condition of posting a $3,000 bail. We had to borrow the money from my parents." The irony was evident. David, who had received my BMW as a gift, now had to pay bail to release Michael from jail. "Sarah, I understand this situation is difficult for you, but Michael made a conscious decision to steal from me and despise me. The consequences are a direct result of his actions. But Robert, we are family. Can't we resolve this without courts?" For 32 years, I tried to resolve Michael's problems with patience and understanding. His response was escalating disrespect and finally theft. The time for family resolutions has passed. "What would Michael have to do for you to drop the charges?" Her question surprised me, not because it was unexpected, but because it revealed that both Sarah and Michael still believed this was a negotiation, not an inevitable legal consequence. "Sarah, this is no longer a question of what Michael can do to fix things. It is a question of justice and teaching him that actions have permanent consequences." I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. Michael had multiple opportunities to rectify his behavior before we reached this point. He had chosen the path of confrontation and contempt, and now he would have to face the consequences of those decisions. That night, as I prepared to sleep, I received one last text message. It was from Michael. Dad, please can we talk tomorrow? I need to explain everything. For the first time in days, Michael was contacting me directly, but his words contained no apologies acknowledged, no gravity of his actions, and showed no genuine remorse. They only expressed the desire to explain, as if his motivations could justify the theft. I did not reply to the message. The time for explanations had passed. The judicial process would take its course, and Michael would have to learn for the first time in his adult life that some actions cannot be undone with words. The following days passed like a blur of legal activity I had never experienced before. On Monday, April 22nd, I received an unexpected call from Linda Smith, Sarah's mother, and David's wife. Her voice sounded tense and worried. Mr. Miller, this is Linda, Sarah's mother. Could we meet to talk about this situation? As Sarah's mother and David's wife, I'm very distressed by everything that is happening. Linda, I understand your concern, but this is a legal matter that must be resolved in the courts. Please, just half an hour we can meet at the Century Coffee Shop near the square. I need to understand what led things to this extreme. Her sincere tone convinced me to agree. An hour later, we met at the historic coffee shop downtown. Linda was a 55-year-old woman, short, with dyed blonde hair and a maternal expression radiating genuine concern. Mr. Miller, first of all, I want to apologize for my husband's actions. David confessed to me last night that he knew something was not right when Michael gave him the BMW. A car of that value is not given without reason. Her words surprised me. Did your husband know the gift was irregular? He suspected but chose not to ask questions because it suited him to have a better vehicle. He has been ashamed since the police went to our house. And what do you think of all this, Linda? Linda sighed deeply. As a nurse at the city hospital, I have seen families destroyed by similar situations. I believe Michael made a grave mistake, but I also believe you are the only one who can prevent this situation from completely ruining his future. Linda, for 32 years, I have prevented Michael from facing the consequences of his mistakes. That era is over. I understand your position, Mr. Miller, but I want you to know that Sarah is suffering a lot. Her marriage is shaking, and she is not to blame for Michael's decisions. That conversation made me reflect on the collateral victims of this situation. Sarah, Linda, and even David were paying high prices for Michael's irresponsible actions. But that reality did not change the fundamental fact. Michael had chosen this path despite knowing the possible consequences. On Wednesday, April the 24th, Detective O'Connor summoned me to the station to review the final details of the investigation before remitting the case to court. Mr. Miller, we have completed all preliminary procedures. The file will be sent to the District Court, number 7, this afternoon. Judge Alexander Camp will be presiding over the case. What kind of magistrate is Judge Camp? He is known for being fair but strict with property crimes. He does not usually show leniency with people who exploit family relationships to commit crimes. When will the first hearing be? Probably within 2 or 3 weeks. Your son will receive an official summons at his home. You will also be summoned as the plaintiff. That same afternoon, my lawyer, Bernard, called me with important news. Robard, I have spoken with Michael's defense attorney, Fred Stone. He is a competent criminal lawyer who has requested a meeting to explore the possibility of an out-of-court settlement. What kind of agreement? Michael would plead guilty to the charges in exchange for a reduced sentence pay, full restitution, plus legal costs, and receive probation instead of effective prison time. How much money are we talking about? Fred proposes $10,000 in total, $5,000 for damages, $3,000 for legal costs, and $2,000 as compensation for emotional stress caused. The figure was considerable. It represented almost 5 months of salary for Michael, and I doubted he and Sarah had that amount available. Bernard, what is your professional recommendation? From a legal point of view, the agreement is favorable for you. It guarantees economic restitution and avoids the uncertainty of a trial. From a personal point of view, only you can decide if it is sufficient to satisfy your sense of justice. That night, I reflected long on the proposal. On one hand, $10,000 was a significant sum that would teach Michael a lasting economic lesson. On the other hand, probation meant he would not face real prison time, which he could interpret as having gotten off easy once again. On Friday, April the 26th, Michael called me directly for the first time since the day of the theft. "Dad, can we talk for 5 minutes? I promise I am not going to ask you to drop the charges." His tone was different, more humble, less confrontational. I decided to listen to him. "Dad, I want you to know that I realize I made a grave mistake, not only with the car, but with the way I have treated you over the last few years." "What made you realize that, Michael?" "Being at the police station, being interrogated like a common criminal, seeing the shame in Sarah's eyes. For the first time in my life, I understood how my actions affect other people." His words sounded sincere, but I had heard apologies from Michael many times before, only to see the same behavioral patterns repeat. "Michael, do you understand why I made the decision to report you? At first, no, I thought you were being cruel and inflexible. But now I understand that for years you have been trying to teach me boundaries, and I never respected them. And what do you plan to do about it? My lawyer says I can plead guilty and pay restitution. I do not have the money now, but I can borrow it or pay it in monthly installments. Where are you going to get $10,000, Michael?" David offered to lend it to me. He says he feels responsible for accepting the car knowing something was not right. The irony of the situation was notable. David, whom Michael had wanted to impress with my stolen BMW, would now have to finance the legal consequences of that very crime. And Sarah, how is she handling all this situation? Michael kept silent for several seconds before answering. "Not very well. She says she does not recognize me anymore, that the man she married would never have done something like this. We have been arguing a lot. Have you considered marriage counseling? She does not want to. She says first, I have to solve my personal problems before we can work on our couple problems." For the first time in years, Michael was facing real and multiple consequences for his actions. Legal, economic, marital, and family. All simultaneously. "Dad, I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any possibility we can rebuild our relationship after this is over?" His question took me by surprise. During the last few days, I had been so focused on the legal process that I had not reflected on the possibility of future reconciliation. "Michael, that will depend entirely on you, on how you handle this process, on whether you really learn from this experience, and if you are willing to rebuild the relationship based on mutual respect, not economic dependence. I understand. Would you accept the agreement my lawyer proposes? I am going to consider it over the weekend. I will give you an answer on Monday." After hanging up, I felt strangely optimistic for the first time in weeks, not because the situation had improved, but because finally I was hearing Michael speak like a responsible adult who understood the gravity of his actions. On Sunday, April the 28th, after 2 days of reflection, I made my final decision. I called Bernard to communicate it. I accepted the out-of-court settlement with an additional condition. Michael must complete 200 hours of community service working with the elderly. I want him to learn the value of respect toward older generations. It is an unusual condition, Robert, but I can propose it during negotiations. On Tuesday, the April 30th, both lawyers met to finalize the terms of the agreement. Michael accepted all conditions without objections. Plead guilty. Pay $10,000 in restitution. Receive 12 months of probation. And complete 200 hours of community service. The court hearing was scheduled for July 15th, 2024, where Judge Camp would formally ratify the agreement and pronounce the official sentence. For the first time since April 15th, I felt I had made the right decisions. Michael would face significant consequences for his actions, but he would also have the opportunity to learn and grow from the experience. The legal process had served its purpose to teach that all actions, especially those that hurt family, have lasting consequences. During the weeks following the legal agreement, Chicago experienced an unusually hot May. Temperatures exceeded 90 degrees for several consecutive days, creating a suffocating atmosphere that seemed to reflect the family tensions that still persisted after resolving the judicial conflict. On May 8th, I received an unexpected call from Amanda. Her voice sounded altered, more worried than usual. "Robert, I need to tell you something important. Sarah came to see me yesterday afternoon. She was very distressed and asked me for advice on her marriage with Michael." "What kind of advice?" "She is considering separation. She says since the arrest, Michael has changed completely. He has become irritable, aggressive, and blames everyone except himself for the situation he is in. This information worried me deeply. During our last phone conversation, Michael had seemed reflective and repentant. Apparently that attitude had not lasted long. Did Sarah mention specific incidents?" "Yes, and they are worrying Robert. She says Michael has been drinking more than usual, especially at night. He has also had several outbursts of anger where he screams and throws objects. Has he physically assaulted her?" "So far, no, but Sarah is scared. She says last week Michael broke a plate against the wall during an argument about money, and the fragments almost hurt her. I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of concern and guilt. Had my complaint contributed to destabilizing Michael's personality to the point of turning him potentially violent? Or was my son's true nature simply revealing itself under extreme pressure?" On May 12th, Sarah called me directly. Her voice sounded tired and defeated. "Robert, I know you probably do not want to hear about our marital problems, but I have no one else to talk to. I am listening, Sarah. What is happening? Michael is blaming me for everything that has happened. He says if my father had not accepted the BMW, none of this would have happened. He also says I should convince you to drop all conditions of the legal agreement." "And what did you answer him?" "I told him he was the one who made the decision to steal the car, and he has to accept the consequences. But that only made him more furious." Sarah then told me about a series of incidents revealing an increasingly worrying pattern of behavior. Michael had started arriving late from work without explanations. When she asked him where he had been, he reacted with disproportionate anger. "Yesterday I found 3 empty beer bottles hidden in the bedroom closet. When I asked him about it, he shouted at me to stop watching him as if he were a criminal." "Sarah, have you considered talking to a professional about this situation?" "Yes, I contacted a psychologist specializing in couples therapy, but Michael flatly refuses to attend. He says the only ones who need therapy are weak people who cannot solve their own problems." On May 18th, while doing my weekly shopping at the Central Market, I unexpectedly ran into David Smith. He seemed to have aged several years in the last month. His face showed tension lines I had not noticed during our meeting at the time of the BMW recovery. "Robert, can we talk for a moment?" We headed to a small bar nearby and ordered 2 coffees. David seemed nervous, playing with his car keys while speaking. "I want you to know I am very sorry for everything that has happened. I should have questioned Michael when he brought me your car. Deep down, I knew something was not right." "How is Michael handling work at your company?" "That is part of the problem. His performance has decreased considerably. He arrives late, gets distracted easily, and has had conflicts with other employees. Yesterday I had to call his attention because he yelled at one of the bricklayers for a minor mistake. Are you considering firing him?" "I do not want to do it, because I know he needs the job to pay the restitution, but he is putting the work environment of the entire company at risk." David then revealed something that alarmed me deeply. "Robert, last night, Linda told me that Sarah confided in her that Michael had started blaming her for ruining his life by marrying him. He says if it were not for her that he would never have met our family and never would have made the mistake of gifting me your car. That logic makes no sense. I know, but Michael seems convinced that everyone is conspiring against him. Yesterday, he told Sarah that you had planned all this to destroy his marriage and distance him from our family. This information revealed to me that Michael was developing a distorted narrative of events in which he was the victim of a family conspiracy rather than the perpetrator of a crime. On May 25th, I received an urgent call from Linda Smith at 11 at night. Mr. Miller, Sarah is at our house. She had to leave the apartment because Michael arrived drunk and started screaming and breaking things. Is she hurt? Physically, no, but she is very scared. Michael told her that if she did not support him completely against you and against us, she would have to leave the house. Where is Michael now? We do not know. Sarah says he left the apartment after his outburst of rage and has not returned. The next day, Sarah came to visit me at my apartment. It was the first time I had seen her since before Michael's arrest, and the change in her appearance was notable. She had lost weight, had pronounced dark circles, and her body posture reflected extreme stress. Robert, I need to tell you something I have never told anyone, not even my parents. She sat on my living room sofa and began to tell me a story that left me frozen. Michael did not start behaving aggressively after the arrest. He has had episodes of controlled anger throughout our marriage, but I justified them as work stress or financial pressures. What kind of episodes? At first it was just yelling when things did not go his way, but gradually they escalated. He pushed me for the first time 6 months ago during an argument about money. Afterwards he apologized and promised it would never happen again. And did it happen again? Sarah nodded with tears in her eyes. 3 more times. The last time was 2 weeks ago. He grabbed my arm so hard he left bruises. I had to use long sleeves to hide them at work. Why hadn't you reported this before? Because I believed it was my fault. Michael always convinced me that I had provoked his anger, that if I had been more understanding or supportive, he would not have reacted that way. Sarah explained to me that the episodes of domestic violence had increased in frequency and intensity after Michael lost his job in March, but that the arrest and legal process had acted as catalysts, intensifying his abusive behavior. Last night, when he arrived drunk, he told me everything was my fault, that if my family had not existed, he never would have taken your car, and that is why his life was ruined. Sarah, have you spoken to any professional about domestic violence? I called the Battered Women's Helpline this morning. They gave me information on shelters and legal procedures to obtain a restraining order. Are you considering those options? Yes, I cannot keep living in fear that Michael will explode, and this time hurt me seriously. That conversation made me understand that the theft of my BMW had been just the tip of the iceberg of much deeper problems in Michael's personality. The pressure of the legal process had not created these problems. It had simply removed the masks, hiding his true nature. On May 30th, Sarah made the decision to move permanently to her parents' house and begin legal separation proceedings. She also filed a domestic violence complaint in family court, requesting a restraining order against Michael. When I found out this news, I experienced complex feelings. On one hand, I was glad Sarah had found the courage to protect herself. On the other hand, I could not help wondering if my complaint had precipitated a crisis that could have been handled differently. But reflecting more deeply, I reached a clear conclusion. Michael had chosen his actions every step of the way. He had chosen to steal from me. He had chosen to disrespect me. He had chosen domestic violence, and he had chosen alcoholism as an escape mechanism. My decisions had been responses to his actions, not the causes of his fundamental character problems. If anything, the legal process had served an additional and unexpected purpose. It had protected Sarah by revealing Michael's true nature before the violence escalated to more dangerous levels. The first week of June 2024 marked an unexpected turning point in this whole situation. On Wednesday, June 5th, while reviewing my morning mail, I found a certified letter from Family Court Number 3. Sarah had made her divorce request official, and the restraining order against Michael had been temporarily approved. That same afternoon, my lawyer Bernard called me with news related to the criminal case. Robert Michael's lawyer has contacted me with an unexpected proposal. Michael wants to accelerate the full restitution payment before the hearing on July 15th. Does he have the money available? Apparently, yes. David Smith has decided to lend him the full $10,000 at once instead of allowing monthly payments. He wants to resolve everything quickly to distance his family from Michael. This decision by David did not surprise me. With Sarah living back at her parents' house and with the restraining order in force, it was logical they wanted to close all legal ties with Michael as soon as possible. What implications does this have for the judicial process? If Michael pays full restitution before the hearing, the judge will likely see this as a sign of responsibility and genuine remorse. It could positively influence the final sentence. On Friday, June 7th, I received a bank transfer of $10,000 with the concept legal restitution, Michael Miller. Seeing it in my bank account generated conflicting feelings in me. On one hand, it represented economic justice for the damage caused. On the other hand, I knew this money came from the man Michael had tried to impress by stealing from me. That same day, I made a decision I had been contemplating for weeks, selling my BMW. The memories associated with the vehicle had become too painful. Every time I drove it, I remembered Michael's betrayal and the traumatic events of the last 2 months. I contacted the dealership where I had bought the car in 2021. The sales manager, Tony, evaluated the vehicle and offered me $22,000, considering it had only 20,000 miles and was in excellent condition. Mr. Miller, are you interested in any replacement model? The question made me reflect on what I really wanted. During the last few years, I had been living conservatively, saving money, without a specific purpose. Maybe it was time to invest in something that really brought me satisfaction. I want to see the most recent Mercedes-Benz E-Class you have available. Tony showed me a 2024 Mercedes-Benz E220D metallic black with beige leather interior and all the most advanced technological features. The price was $48,000, significantly more expensive than my previous BMW, but within my economic means. It is a completely different vehicle from the one you currently have, more elegant, comfortable, and with state-of-the-art security systems. After a 30-minute test drive through Chicago, I made the decision. I sold my BMW for $22,000 and bought the Mercedes-Benz for $48,000, paying the difference of $26,000 from my personal savings. Driving my new car for the first time was a liberating experience. There were no painful memories associated with this vehicle. It represented a new chapter of my life, one in which I controlled my decisions without being conditioned by family manipulations or expectations. On Saturday, June 8th, I decided to visit Amanda to tell her about recent developments. I found her working in her garden, planting red geraniums in terracotta pots. "Robert, you look different, calmer." "I feel different. For the first time in months, I feel I have control over my own life." I told her about the sale of the BMW and the purchase of the Mercedes-Benz, as well as the full payment of restitution. "Have you heard anything from Michael directly?" "No, and honestly, I do not expect to hear from him soon. Sarah told me he is living alone in the suburban apartment, but his behavior remains erratic." Amanda put her watering can aside and looked at me seriously. "Robert, do you think you did the right thing reporting Michael?" It was a question I had asked myself many times over the last few weeks. "Amanda, when I made that decision, I thought I was teaching Michael about responsibility and consequences. I did not anticipate it would reveal such deep problems in his personality. Do you regret it? I do not regret defending myself and demanding respect, but it saddens me to have discovered that my son is capable of domestic violence and abusive behavior." Amanda nodded understandingly. "Sometimes being a parent means accepting that our children can take paths we never imagined. On Tuesday, June 11th, I received an unexpected call from Detective O'Connor. "Mr. Miller, I have additional information about your son that might interest you. Michael was arrested last night for disorderly conduct at a bar downtown. What happened exactly? According to witnesses, Michael got drunk and began making public accusations against you and the Smith family. He was saying everyone had conspired to ruin his life. When the bar staff asked him to calm down, he reacted aggressively and broke several glasses. What legal consequences does this have?" He was released after paying a $300 fine for damage to the establishment's property. However, this incident will be reported to the judge handling his main criminal case, as it violates the conditions of his probation. This information worried me because it could complicate the hearing on July 15th. If Michael continued behaving irresponsibly, the judge might decide to impose a more severe sentence. On Sunday, June 16th, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Take a vacation. I booked a week at a rural lodge near Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. I wanted time away from Chicago from painful memories and the possibility of awkward encounters with extended family members. The Grand Lodge had only 12 rooms and was located on a historic estate, surrounded by lavender fields and ancient trees. During those 7 days, I walked along rural paths, read books I had bought years ago but never had time to enjoy, and reflected on the directions I wanted to take in this new stage of my life. One morning, while having breakfast on the hotel terrace, contemplating the landscape, I met Dorothy Jones, a 68-year-old widow who was also spending a few days alone at the hotel. She was a retired literature teacher from a high school in Madison with a warm personality and an optimistic perspective on life that I found refreshing. "What brought you to this quiet corner?" She asked me while we shared coffee and homemade muffins. I needed to distance myself from some complicated family problems. "And you?" "Every year I come here for the anniversary of my husband's death. It was his favorite place, but it is no longer a sad tradition. It has become a celebration of good memories." During the following days, Dorothy and I shared long conversations about life, family loss, and the importance of maintaining personal dignity despite difficult circumstances. "Robert, from the little you have told me about your family situation, it seems to me that you made brave decisions to protect your self-esteem. That is not easy when it comes to children. Sometimes I wonder if I was too hard. Too hard. You established reasonable boundaries after years of being disrespected. That is not hardness. It is emotional survival. Upon returning to Chicago on Sunday, June 23rd, I felt renewed, mentally and emotionally. The vacation had given me perspective on how much my life had changed in the last 2 months, and how much my personal well-being had improved since I stopped allowing Michael to manipulate my emotions and decisions. I found my apartment exactly as I had left it, but now I saw it with different eyes. It was no longer the refuge of a worried father waiting for calls from a troubled son. It was the home of an independent man who had regained control of his life. That week, I decided to start exploring activities I had postponed for years. I signed up for a digital photography course at the community center. I contacted old work friends with whom I had lost touch and began planning a more extensive trip to Italy that I had been dreaming of since my retirement. On Monday, July 1st, exactly 2 weeks before the final court hearing, I felt prepared to close this painful chapter of my life definitively. Michael had made his choices, had faced appropriate consequences, and now we both had the opportunity to build separate and independent futures. For the first time in months, the future seemed full of possibilities rather than family complications. On Monday, July 8th, 2024, a week before the final court hearing, I decided to do something I hadn't done in over 20 years, attend Sunday Mass. It wasn't that I had a sudden religious awakening, but I felt the need to find inner peace before the definitive closure of this traumatic chapter of my life. St. Michael's Parish, located in my neighborhood near my apartment, had modest but welcoming architecture. The red brick building dated back to the 50s, with simple stained glass windows filtering the morning light, creating multicolored patterns inside. I arrived early for the 10 a.m. Mass and sat in one of the back pews. The congregation was small but diverse, devout, elderly people, some young families with children and middle-aged people like me who seemed to be looking for something more than just religious ritual. The priest, Father Anthony, was a man of 71 with completely white hair, a well-groomed beard, and a serene presence that radiated genuine compassion. His homily that morning focused on the theme of forgiveness, not as weakness, but as personal liberation from resentment. Forgiveness, Father Anthony said, does not mean accepting unacceptable behaviors or allowing others to hurt us repeatedly. It means freeing ourselves from the weight of resentment, to be able to live in peace with our own decisions. His words resonated deeply with me. Over the last few months, I had struggled with feelings of guilt about the consequences of my complaint against Michael, but I was beginning to understand that protecting my dignity and setting boundaries required no apologies or justifications. After Mass, Father Anthony approached to greet each member of the congregation personally. When he reached me, he extended a warm hand and smiled genuinely. "Welcome to our community. I am Father Anthony. Is it your first visit to St. Michael's?" "Yes, Father. I am Robert Miller. I live near here, but hadn't attended Mass for many years. What brought you back, if it is not too personal to ask?" "I have been going through a very difficult family situation recently. I am looking for inner peace to be able to move forward." Father Anthony nodded understandingly. "Would you like to have coffee with me someday this week? Sometimes talking to someone neutral can help process painful experiences." I accepted his invitation, and we met on Wednesday, July 10th, at a small coffee shop called the Quiet Corner, near the church. Father Anthony arrived dressed in civilian clothes, a light blue shirt and khaki pants, projecting a more accessible image than during the religious ceremony. "Robert, tell me about that family situation that is worrying you." I recounted the whole story, from the theft of the BMW to recent developments with Sarah and the domestic violence. Father Anthony listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or taking notes in a small notebook. "Do you feel guilty for reporting your son?" "Sometimes, yes. I wonder if I could have handled the situation differently with more patience or understanding." "Robert, you described decades of patience and generosity toward Michael. At what point does patience become complicity with abusive behavior?" His question made me reflect. I had never considered that my historic tolerance toward Michael's mistakes could have contributed to his sense of impunity. "Do you think I did the right thing, Father? I believe you protected your human dignity after years of being disrespected. That is not only right, it is necessary for your spiritual and emotional well-being." Father Anthony then spoke to me about the concept of well-ordered charity in Catholic doctrine. The idea that caring for oneself is not selfishness, but a necessary moral responsibility to be able to genuinely care for others. If you had continued allowing Michael's abuse and lack of respect, what message would you have sent him about healthy human relationships? And what example would you have given about how you treat the people we love most? That conversation marked the beginning of an unexpected but significant friendship. I began attending Sunday Mass regularly and occasionally participated in parish activities during the week. On Friday, July 12th, Father Anthony invited me to learn about the social aid program the church coordinated for elderly people in the neighborhood. Dorothy Jones, the woman I had met during my vacation, was back in town that week and coincidentally had also started attending St. Michael's. "Robert, what a surprise to find you here," Dorothy told me when we met in the parish hall, where charitable activities were organized. "Dorothy, I didn't know you lived in the city. I returned 3 days ago from Wisconsin. I decided to move here after selling my house. The city offers me more cultural and social opportunities for this stage of my life." Father Anthony explained the operation of the social assistance program, The parish coordinated weekly visits to elderly people living alone, organized community meals on Sundays after Mass, and managed a food bank for needy families. Would you be interested in participating as volunteers? Both Dorothy and I accepted immediately. I was assigned the responsibility of visiting 3 elderly people in the neighborhood weekly who had mobility difficulties. Linda Torres, 89 years old, a widow for 10 years. Steve Martin, 85 years old, living alone after his wife's death the previous year. And Mary Fernandez, 82 years old, who had severe arthritis problems. My first visit on Saturday, July 13th, was to Linda Torres. She lived in a small but impeccably clean apartment in a building from the 60s. When she opened the door, she greeted me with a radiant smile. "You must be Robert. Father Anthony told me you would come to visit me. Come in, come in. I have prepared tea and homemade cookies." Linda turned out to be a natural conversationalist with an extraordinary memory for historical details of the city. For 2 hours, she told me stories about what the city was like during the 40s and 50s, about her late husband who had worked at the port, and about her 3 children who now lived in other cities. "Do you know what I miss the most?" she asked me while pouring a second cup of tea. "What, Linda?" "Genuine conversations with people who really listen. My children call me every Sunday, but they are always in a hurry, always rushing to end the call." Her words reminded me of my own experiences with Michael over the last few years. The few times we spoke on the phone, he always seemed distracted, as if the conversation were an annoying obligation rather than an opportunity for connection. The visit to Steve Martin was completely different. He was a reserved, almost shy man who clearly had few visitors since his wife Grace's death. His apartment was tidy, but had that lonely atmosphere of someone who no longer has the motivation to care for decorative details. "I don't know why Father Anthony thought I needed visitors," he told me initially with some resistance. "He thought we could keep each other company." I have also gone through difficult times recently. Gradually, Steve began to open up. He told me about his 50 years of marriage to Grace, about how they had built a simple but happy life, him working as a mechanic and her as a seamstress. His greatest pain was not having children of their own. Grace always said the neighbors' children were also our children. We looked after many children in the building while their parents worked, but when you are old and alone, you realize those bonds were not as strong as you thought. My visit to Mary Fernandez was the most emotional. Her arthritis had left her practically immobile, and she depended on a caregiver who came 3 hours every morning to help her with basic tasks. "Robert, do you have children?" "I have a son, but our relationship is complicated. I have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. Do you know how many times they visited me last month?" "Once. My youngest daughter came for half an hour to bring me medication." Mary did not express bitterness, but a resigned sadness that broke my heart. She had dedicated her entire life to raising her children, and now faced old age, practically abandoned by them. That night, after my 3 visits, I reflected on the perspectives these elderly people had given me on family relationships. Linda, Steve, and Mary had experienced different types of loneliness in old age, but they all shared something in common: the basic human need for genuine connection and respect. On Sunday, July 14th, the day before the final court hearing, I attended Mass with a sense of inner peace I hadn't felt in months. During the ceremony, I silently gave thanks for having found this community of people who valued human dignity, genuine compassion, and selfless service toward others. Father Anthony approached me after Mass. "How do you feel about tomorrow's hearing? Prepared and at peace?" "Thank you for helping me find perspective on all this." "Robert, you found the perspective within yourself. I only provided a safe space for you to reflect." That afternoon, while preparing for the final hearing, I knew that regardless of what happened the next day, I had found something invaluable. A community of authentic people who valued relationships based on mutual respect and a renewed purpose in helping others facing their own difficulties. The experience with Michael had been painful, but it had also led me to discover aspects of myself I didn't know existed and to form more genuine human connections than any I had had in years. Monday, July 15th, 2024, dawned clear and cool in Chicago. At 8 in the morning, I dressed in my best dark gray suit, the same one I had worn for Michael's wedding 3 years ago, and headed to the courthouse for the final hearing. During the drive in my new Mercedes Benz, I reflected on how much my life had changed since that April 15th, when I discovered the missing BMW. In the courtroom of District Court Number 7, the atmosphere was formal but quiet. Judge Alexander Camp, a man of about 50, with a well-groomed gray beard and serious expression, presided from his bench. My lawyer Bernard sat next to me at the plaintiff's table while Michael occupied the opposite table next to his defender, Fred Stone. Seeing Michael after almost 2 months was shocking. He had lost considerable weight, had deep dark circles under his eyes, and his body posture reflected defeat and exhaustion. He wore a navy blue suit that seemed too big for him, as if it had been bought when he weighed more. Your Honors, we will proceed with the ratification of the out-of-court settlement reached between the parties, announced Judge Camp. Fred Stone stood up to present Michael's position. Your Honor, my client pleads guilty to the charges of misappropriation and illegal disposal of property. He has complied with the full payment of the agreed economic restitution and accepts the conditions of probation and community service. Judge Camp carefully reviewed the documentation. Mr. Michael Miller, do you understand that by pleading guilty to these charges, you will have a permanent criminal record that could affect your future employment opportunities? Michael stood up with difficulty. His voice sounded hoarse and weak. Yes, Your Honor, I understand the consequences of my actions. Do you have anything to add before I pronounce the sentence? Michael looked in my direction for the first time during the entire hearing. His eyes reflected a mixture of sadness, regret, and something I interpreted as a silent plea. Your Honor, I want to express my deep regret for my actions. Not only did I hurt my father, but I betrayed the trust of someone who had given me everything in life. I accept full responsibility for my decisions. Judge Camp nodded and began to pronounce the official sentence. Michael Miller, for the crime of misappropriation of property valued at $40,000 and illegal disposal of another's property, you are sentenced to 12 months of probation, subject to monthly reporting to this court during said period. Additionally, you must complete 200 hours of community service in institutions serving the elderly. The hearing ended at 10:30 in the morning. Michael approached me in the hallways of the courthouse while we waited for the elevators. Dad, can we talk for 5 minutes? I agreed, and we headed to a small cafeteria inside the judicial building. We sat at a secluded table surrounded by the murmur of lawyers and court officials. Dad, I know I have no right to ask this, but I want you to know that these last few months have been the worst of my life. Not just because of the legal consequences, but because of realizing who I had become. What do you mean by that, Michael? I mean, I lost respect for you for myself and for everything that really matters. I thought impressing David was more important than valuing the man who raised me alone for 20 years. His words sounded sincere, but I had heard apologies from Michael many times before. Michael, what has really changed in your perspective? Losing Sarah made me realize that my behavior wasn't just irresponsible, it was abusive. Being alone in the apartment these last few weeks forced me to face who I really am without the distractions of blaming others. Has he sought professional help? Yes. I am attending psychological therapy twice a week with Dr. Ellen Vance. I also joined a support group for men who have exercised domestic violence. This information surprised me positively. Michael had never before shown willingness to seek professional help for his personal problems. And what do you plan to do with your life now? David fired me last week. Apparently, my problems were affecting the work environment at the company. I am looking for a job, but having a criminal record makes everything harder. Where are you living? I'm still in the suburban apartment, but I will probably have to move to something cheaper. Without David's salary and without your monthly transfers, I cannot afford the current rent. We talked for half an hour more. Michael told me about the therapy sessions, about how he was learning to recognize the toxic behavioral patterns he had developed, and about his plans to rebuild his life independently. Dad, do you think someday we can have a normal father-son relationship? Michael, that will depend entirely on you, on whether you really change your behavior in the long term, not just temporarily, while facing consequences. I understand. I do not expect you to trust me immediately. I just hope you keep the door open for the future. We said goodbye cordially, but without hugs or emotional promises. It was an appropriate ending to this painful stage, civilized, honest, but without false reconciliations. That afternoon I celebrated discreetly at home with a bottle of red wine I had been saving for a special occasion. I was not celebrating Michael's suffering, but the recovery of my own dignity and autonomy. During the following months, I immersed myself completely in the activities of St. Michael's Parish. Weekly visits to Linda, Steve, and Mary became the most rewarding moments of my week. These elderly people genuinely appreciated my company and treated me with the respect Michael had never shown. In September 2024, Father Anthony proposed I coordinate an expanded home visit program for elderly people in the neighborhood. I accepted the responsibility with enthusiasm and soon was managing a team of 12 volunteers, regularly visiting more than 30 elderly people. My friendship with Dorothy Jones deepened too. We shared weekly dinners, attended cultural events in the city together, and occasionally traveled to nearby towns to explore local markets and historic sites. It was not romance, it was authentic companionship, based on shared interests and mutual respect. In November 2024, I received a letter from Michael informing me he had gotten a job as an administrative assistant at a logistics company. The salary was modest, $2,000 a month, but allowed him to live independently. He also informed me he had completed 150 of the 200 required community service hours, working at a day center for the elderly in a nearby town. I did not reply to the letter immediately. I needed time to process my feelings about this contact. Finally, I sent him a brief note congratulating him on his job and wishing him success in completing his community service. In December 2024, while helping organize the parish's annual Christmas dinner, I reflected on the extraordinary changes I had experienced in 8 months. I had gone from being a manipulated and disrespected father to an independent man with clear purpose and authentic relationships. Linda Torres told me something that Christmas that perfectly summarized my transformation. Robert, when I met you in July, you seemed like a man carrying the weight of the world. Now you radiate peace and satisfaction. What changed? I learned that loving someone does not mean allowing them to disrespect you, I answered. And I discovered there are many ways to be valuable to others without sacrificing one's own dignity. On January 15th, 2025, exactly 9 months after the theft of the BMW, I received a message from Michael informing me he had successfully completed his 200 hours of community service. His supervisor at the day center had praised his dedication and patience with the elderly residents. That night, while dining alone in my apartment, I felt a strange sense of complete closure. Michael had met all the legal conditions of his sentence, and I had built a new and satisfying life, independent of our past conflicts. Would we have a normal father-son relationship again someday? I did not know, and honestly, I no longer worried about the answer. I had learned that my happiness and my sense of purpose did not depend on Michael's decisions or behavior. My new life in the city, surrounded by genuine friends at the parish, helping people who really appreciated my presence, and free from family emotional manipulations, was more satisfying than I had imagined possible. I had found something I had lost years ago without realizing it, the inner peace that comes from living according to your own values, without compromising your dignity to maintain toxic relationships, even with family. At 65, I had begun the most authentic and rewarding chapter of my adult life. If you liked this story, hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thanks for watching.